Good morning, Dr. Joel here. It's a beautiful morning. I'm just out with a couple of the cows you can see in the background and just switching them over to pastures. And I thought I'd do a quick video just to kind of give you an idea of why I choose to raise grass-fed and grass-finished beef. And for some of you, you know that I do a little bit of farming, just a little bit of a hobby farm, and I really got kind of passionate about grass-fed, grass-finished beef years ago after my youngest daughter was diagnosed with an aggressive form of childhood leukemia. But I thought it'd be beneficial just to, you can see a couple of the cows back here as I switch them over from pasture, just to kind of give you some tips in terms of why I not only consume it, why I raise them for myself, but then also why we recommend and promote them, so to speak, for our practice members, patients, and overall for mankind. So the main thing is that when we look at grass-fed, grass-finished beef, I'm going to refer to them just at this point as grass-fed, but I do want to clarify the fact that when you go to, let's say, an average store, whether it be a health food store or a supermarket, when you see packaging that says grass-fed beef, grass-fed and grass-finished beef are different. And the main difference is, and they're both better, in my opinion, than conventionally raised beef. I grew up on a farm, and that farm we raised, anywhere from maybe 80 to hundreds of cows a day, or at a time, let's say. But the main thing with that is that when we raised cows in the past, these cows were raised on a feedlot, which meant there was no grass, there were no pastures. They were basically fed corn and silage and hay. And so they're not out there like what these cows are. You can see in the background just kind of totally relaxed and healthy and well taken care of, getting plenty of sunshine and fresh water. In fact, with my cattle here, we give them the same filtered water that we drink. We have it ran out to them as well. And so, but the point with this is that grass-fed and grass-finished beef are different. The way they're different is if it doesn't say on the packaging grass-fed and grass-finished, what that means is that the cows, like the ones behind me here, are raised basically in pasture. They're raised off of grasses, and during the winter they're raised off of certain hays. But in the same sense, many times before they're taken to market, they're then, usually for anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe sometimes 8 weeks, their space is then confined so they're less active. And oftentimes what they do then is they load them up on grain and corn, because what they want to do is they want to get them fatter before they take them to market for a couple reasons. One is to be able to increase their weight, because cows are sold by weight most commonly. And then secondly is because they want some of that fat, because when you think about a big fat juicy steak, you're thinking that fat, and that creates that marbling, and that creates flavor. And so a lot of people, they're so accustomed to basically having fatty, unhealthy meat that they kind of want that. So the main thing with that is you have to be careful on if you're getting grass-fed or grass-finished, because like with the cattle that I raise, they're grass-fed, grass-finished. That means that from the time we get them out in the pastures, they're raised off of pasture and raised off of certain hays during the winter their whole life. And that doesn't change even up to the point where we take them to market. They're always on the fresh grasses out here. And what I personally like to do is I like to basically raise my cows on pasture all summer long. And then generally speaking, after they've been, from winter to where they go into pasture, I try to, before I take them to market, I try to raise them on pasture for the last several months before we take them in, just so then that way they have tons of fresh grass, because I want my meat as healthy as possible. Any advantage I can get, I get it. But here's a couple key tips, on why grass-fed, grass-finished is so much better. First off, it has to do with omega-3s. The research shows that, your omega-3, when you think of omega-3, omega-6, these are essential fatty acids, which means that your body needs them to be healthy. The problem is that your body relies on them because it can't make it on its own, so it relies on it totally from diet. But grass-fed, grass-finished beef has a much higher level of omega-3s. Then you have your conjugated linoleic acid, which we refer to as CLA. CLA is basically, has been shown through research to be amazing, and it's much higher in grass-fed beef. And the reason this is so important is because, number one, it promotes overall health, which is what we all want, is to be healthy, right? The other thing it does is it has cancer-fighting properties, as well as the fact that for people who are looking, to lose weight, this also is very beneficial in that. And that's why sometimes you'll see in the weight loss niche that people recommend that you take, CLA type of supplementation for that. But when you get in your diet source, it's always going to be a better way to get it, because it's in a more natural state. The other thing has to do with the fact of it's a precursors to your cancer and fighting antioxidants like vitamin E and vitamin A, which are substantially higher. If I'm not mistaken, I think I even read somewhere that like vitamin E is like 400% higher in grass-fed, grass-finished beef. So any advantage you can get, that's fantastic. But then you're going to have, because they're raised off of pasture and grass, you're going to have a whole lot less. Got to switch arms here because my arm's getting a little bit crampy and tired. But you're going to have a whole lot less, fat and dietary cholesterol when you switch this. When you eat grass-fed beef. But the fats that you do get, they're going to be a healthier version because you're getting your essential fatty acids and so forth. Because remember, fat stores toxins, and so when you look at how conventionally raised, cows are raised, they're raised oftentimes in feedlots, and even if they're not raised off feedlots, you're going to have basically to deal with the issues of, number one, most cattle nowadays are genetically modified, which means they've been bred and crossbred and bred and crossbred, and now it's like, who knows what you're really getting in terms of the genetics of the animal itself. And so that's one factor. But even more than that at this point is when they're raised, on basically your GMO type feeds, whether it be your grains and your corns, and then they're just laid into where nowadays it's like farmers a lot of times, and I totally get it. I'm not like anti-conventional farming, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot of things obviously I would disagree with, but the point is that they don't even turn dirt anymore. Everything is no-till, so they're not even getting the nutrients from the soils. A lot of times it's really, you're having fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, you're having genetically modified, you're having hormones. A lot of these different sprays and stuff that they're using are hormone mimickers, like you take, for example, estrogen mimickers. And when you get a lot of times estrogen mimickers, where it's going to disrupt your hormone system, your endocrine system, and what that's going to do is that's going to also cause, because estrogen is a fat storing hormone, that's going to cause people to also have a lot of hormonal issues. And that's why you'll see sometimes guys who, whether out on the golf course or they're exposed to different farm pesticides and so forth, they'll start carrying more fat around their abdomen and so forth because they start to have more higher levels of visceral fat because of estrogen. And then eventually when they get into their mid-50s, most guys even test higher in estrogen than the average 55-year-old female, let's say. So when you look at this, that's one of the main things we want to keep in mind, is the fact that with health, it has to be intentional. We don't want to have this cross our fingers approach. In years past, people were concerned primarily about food and shelter. Nowadays, we take it for granted the fact that we can go down to the grocery store, we can work all day doing whatever we do, not even have anything to do with food and shelter. And then what we do is we just go to the store, pick up some grub, and then eat it, and hope, with this cross our fingers approach, that we're going to end up being healthy. Your health is the most valuable asset you have in this world. And anything that you can do, one thing, if you're saying you want to be healthy, you have to be active and you have to be intentional when it comes to your choices. And so some people will give the argument, well, grass-fed beef is a little bit more expensive. I guarantee it's not as expensive as cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and the lost life that you live because of not eating healthy foods. Your life and the potential you have to be healthy is beyond words. The way God created us in His own image, we are created to be healthy. And so any advantage, any choice that I make that can help me in living the maximum life I possibly can, that's what we want to do. That's what we all should be doing. And so that's why it's like, I don't expect everybody to, buy land like I did and, raise, their own beef and whatnot. But what I do want to do is, help you to understand more or less that these choices like this, it's worth it because it's your life. And there are so many benefits that when you get back to natural, surprisingly to most, natural, in my opinion, and what the research shows, is always going to be better. Because when you look at grass-fed, grass-finished beef, this is one thing, I'll just end on this, is that when I went to a farm one time to look at some cows, I was going to go and I was looking at some cows, and this farmer, who he's what they would call a cattle jockey. In other words, he would buy and sell cows, and to sell them to to various farmers and whatnot. And so he would buy cows, sell cows. And so when I went over to his farm one time, and he basically says, "Hey, do you want to see my secret weapon?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I want to see your secret weapon. What is this?" Because he intrigued he got my curiosity going. So he takes me to the other side of his farm in this big steel building, and I see this literally semi-loads of boxes, and I'm like, what in the world does he have in these boxes? So I'm like, what's in there? And he's like, I'm going to show you. So he grabs a box, gets his knife out of his pocket, opens a box, and here it looks like they're gummy bears. And I'm like, okay. So, I'm thinking, okay, these have got to be some sort of like, like gummy vitamins of some sort, because that's just where my consciousness is, that why wouldn't you want to try to always have healthy stuff, right? So, and he's just like, no, they're not vitamins, they're gummy bears. And I'm like, gummy bears? What do you mean by that? And he's like, oh yeah, I get them. I basically truck them in, because these are the seconds. So there may be like they're made a little bit wrong. There's discoloration in them or whatnot, or maybe they're a little bit expired. So he's like, I ordered literally semi-loads of gummy bears, to be able to get the sugars up in the cows. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. He's like, man, it's an industry. The bigger you can get them, the faster you can get them, the more money you make per pound. He's like, that's the name of the game. Get them, raise them, get them out, makes money. And I'm like, holy smokes. And I'm not faulting the guy for doing that. That's business. And people a lot of times will judge people like that, but that's what everybody pretty much does. They work for money. And so any advantage they get, they do it. And we don't have to agree with that. But the point is that I'm finding more and more to where, some farmers, of course, use corn because, corn and grain are what make you fat. And that's what I was teaching my kids one time, and I'm like, sons, why do you think they give corn, to cows, and he's like, to make them fat. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, so if you sit down to a bag of corn chips, what effect do you think it's going to have on you? And he's like, make me fat? And I'm like, might want to think about that. So it's just keep it simple. You know what I mean? They always tell us, keep it simple, stupid. It's not referring to anybody as stupid. It's just like, keep it simple. Don't complicate it. They give you corn and grains to make you fat in the cattle industry. It's not going to have a different effect, when it comes to you. So these are just a couple thoughts. I know I kind of ran into, a little over 10 minutes or whatever it might be, but I hope you got some value out of this, and I hope you learned some stuff. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you like us on Facebook, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and just always remember, if there's anything we can do to be able to help you to reach that higher level of health so that you can live the life that God created you to live and be vibrant while living it, let us know what we can do. But until next time, have a blessed day, and God bless.